Hello, and welcome to whatever this is. I haven't quite morphed what I am going to do out of this. It could be a podcast, it could be a long form video with this as an audio, and it could be a one off. Who knows? But I wanted to start and see how I end up expressing myself. I've been planning on recording this for like the beginning of the week, and today is Thursday. And I've had the poorest form of sleep possible, like for the past week, and I was like, let me reschedule, and like actually do this when I'm not in a delirious state. Because honestly, if we were to be like truly honest with each other, it's not like I've been out partying or anything. I have been in bed for like 9 hours, like 9 bloody hours. And some days I would even get my full 8 hours of sleep, like my Apple Watch will show so. But the quality of my sleep was just so bad, like actually so bad. And I think like yesterday especially, it was so bad. And then I woke up in the middle of the night sweating. Check the temperature. It was like, what, 20 degrees? I shouldn't be sweating in 20 degrees. And I couldn't fall asleep. And I was like, you know what, let me embrace this. But really, there's nothing to embrace. I'm so physically tired, like my body hurts, my joint hurts, my head hurts, and everything just like hurts. And I'm actually quite afraid that if I don't get a proper night of sleep today, I'll be like gone, like dead, because there's so many research that shows the importance of sleep. I know this because I listened to a lot of Andrew Huberman, and I've listened to like all 6 episodes he had with a sleep scientist, and I made notes. Oh my god, look at me go, making notes about a podcast I listen as if I'm some university student. So like I actually know the impact it's having on like my body and my nervous system, and I'm like, this is making it so much worse. But this wasn't the topic I wanted to talk about today. I had something else in mind, but I just thought I'd start off with this specifically so that it gives context. If I come across as a little bit delirious, you know, a little bit delulu, a little bit off base, this is the reason. This is the context. So a massive disclaimer there. But yeah, I also had this whole outline in my head, and I just watched a Coldplay video, and that kind of reshifted, I think, what I want to talk about. I'm just going to talk about it in 2 seconds. I know I'm like, this topic, but I'm going to go in 40 corners and before I actually touch it. And I think today, I really want to talk about beginning and ends and how I think they don't exist. I would absolutely love to believe that there's such a thing as a beginning and end. And scientifically, because I remember having this like a very similar conversation with my grandpa a few years ago when I was still a university student studying earth science, and we were talking about how everything, if you look at it on a long enough timeline, has a beginning and end. But the thing is, I was thinking about this, and this is where the deliriousness like comes from. And I think even so, you zoom out and you see the beginning and the end. But if you zoom further out, this beginning and the end are just part of a like cycle, I think. I don't know why I'm thinking of the Big Bang Theory right now. Like, you know, there was like the Big Bang, and then there will be a point where gravity is just going to pull everything. Because right now I think the universe is expanding. I could be wrong. Please correct me. I did study science, but that was a long time ago. And there will be a point where gravity is going to pull it back in. So instead of expanding, it's going to do the other thing. I forgot the English word. In French, it's contracter, contract. The universe is going to contract. So it's going to pull inwards. And it's going to, you know, like go back to the reverse of the Big Bang. Technically a beginning and an end. But if you go even further out, I think it's part of a bigger cycle that we don't have enough knowledge about. I was going to be like, Mansi, what are you on? Why were you thinking about beginning and ends? I don't know. I don't quite know. Actually, I quite know. But there's like so many reasons why I was thinking about beginning and ends. Actually, let me just be honest. The whole reason of like this podcast / video / God knows what it is to bear my artistic soul. Yay. Woo! So why was I thinking about there's no such thing as a beginning and an end? Was because I was looking back at this was incited by my previous relationship, which I would say I am like maybe 90% or 95% like having gotten like full closure. There's still like a 5% that lingers around, but I would say like I'm over it. It's just like, I think it's the same with pain. For example, I experienced something quite traumatic when I was a child. My mum died in a car crash. I am completely over it. But there's actual moments where I'm like, that sucks. But this has happened, about 15 years ago now? So this event per se doesn't impact me in any way. When I think about it, I'm fully at peace with it. But for example, when it like certain aspects of it is triggered, for example, someone having a car crash or, something along those lines, I get just as like anxious and restless. So like 99.9% over it. But like, do you fully get over it? So this was this cycle in my head that I was going through. That was like, is there a thing as like a clear definition between beginning and end? And I started thinking like even more like in general. Wow, that was so explicit, Mansi. And I was thinking in general. But I think there's, what's the word? There's patterns across the board. For example, what are patterns that I could describe? Right now, when I'm thinking of patterns, and I have like 100 of them in my brain, but when I'm trying to think of one, my brain just went blank. But if you look at something, actually, cycles. I actually should have wrote an outline. But yeah, okay. So the reason why I was actually thinking about cycles was because we were approaching the summer solstice. Yeah, today is the summer solstice, actually, on the day that I'm recording this. And I was thinking about how this is technically like the middle of summer, and then it goes back to, days in the northern hemisphere getting smaller and smaller. Not smaller, shorter and shorter and shorter. Then it goes back. It's like this whole cycle. Which kind of went back to, it fits in the scheme of seasons, which also, if you think about it, like days, starts with the sun rising, the sun goes in the sky, and then the sun sets, and then like we go back to the sun rising, and it keeps going, and that's like how a day is started. It's the same for women menstrual cycles. Like, there's cycles everywhere. Even planets have cycles, like when you think about it. But I feel like us as humans, like maybe it's just me, but I think like us as humans need this sensation of like beginning and end. It's like, I was born. Yes, you were born, and that's a beginning, but I think it falls in, if you look at it from like, you zoom out quite massively, it's part of this continuous cycle of the Homo sapiens, so what we are, just reproducing itself until we evolve into a completely different species. Because if you zoom out, that literally is what is happening. But us as humans have a tendency to think that everything is technically about us, and there's a lot of literature that explains why we think that way, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm also not a scientist by vocation. I am a data scientist, but I also study scientists at uni, so I think like it's not my prerogative to get into that. But going back to, I think we need this feeling of there needs to be like a clear beginning and a clear end, and this is it. Like, I am born on this day. Maybe please correct me in the comment sections or somewhere, but I think this is why birthdays are such a big thing for us humans. Like, every birthday we're like, yeah, it's a beginning of a new year, of a new me. This is why New Year resolutions are such a big thing. Yeah, I think like we need this sense of beginning and end. And I was thinking about this a lot recently, and I was thinking about this with one of my previous relationship, where trying to kind of decipher when it really begun and when it really ended, because the thing is, we started off as friends, we knew each other for a long time, and he slid into my DMs, and then we became even closer. I was trying to think of like when like that relationship really started, because there's some sort of, to the phase of like flirting and like, hitting on someone, it's so ambiguous that there's not like a clear beginning and end. And also, when did we start dating? Is it when we started talking? Is it when we saw each other again for the first time? Is it when he asked me to be his girlfriend? So, you think about it, all happen at very different phases. And I was also most especially trying to think of when that relationship actually ended or should have ended. I know I'm really deeping it, but that was one of my thoughts very recently. And just like thinking back, and I was like trying to find like such a clear defined beginning and end. And I was like, hold up here. Why am I like being so what's the word? Why am I being so hyper focused on finding out the beginning and the end of stuff? And then I just like rewind back and I'm like, okay, maybe it's a way to get closure, but at the same time, I'm like 95% closure on this whole thing. Also, when talking about 95% closure, I can actually go a little bit more into details about this. But like, it's one of those things where I'm actually fully over it. I'm okay. I have no hard feelings whatsoever. But there's little things that occasionally happen and like hits me in the face, and I'm like, okay, let me just cry in the shower for like 2 minutes and I'll be completely fine. And I am completely fine. I think it's a very similar thing with like pain. When I think of I'm going to share something personal. When my mum died, when I was super young, for a few years, it was kind of like raw, but I was like completely mostly at peace with it, I would say. But things would happen and I would be like, okay, what is happening? Like, hello. But then through the years, especially now, like we can very openly talk about this. Maybe it should be an episode. And honestly, doesn't faze me at all. Completely fine. I would say 99% over it. Because while this very specific topic doesn't affect me, if like very specific thing about like that thing happens, it triggers me in a way and I feel like really anxious and disarmed, and I go back to being like a child feeling very helpless. And yeah, I think it's one of those things. You learn to live through the hardships in your life, but like residuals of it stays with you. It's kind of like scarring. You will see it on your skin, but if like, I don't know, you scratched it, it's not going to bleed kind of way. So that was what I meant when I say 95%. Why was I talking about 95% now? I forgot. Let me pause and re-listen. Okay, yes, so we were talking about closure. I actually don't remember what we were saying about closure, but yes, why was I so hyper-focused in terms of very, like, clear beginning and clear end? And I was like, okay. But yes, going back to the point of, I was like, okay, why am I so hyper-focused on, like, clear beginnings and clear end? And going back into why do we need closure? And then this started to go back into, like, why do we need, like, New Year's resolution? Why do we need, like, a monthly review on the last month of the month? Yeah. Okay. Good point. And it started to, and the more I was, like, asking myself these questions, it kind of came to this point of, like, we feel more powerful, or at least this is my theory. So please chip in if you have any other ideas, whether I'm, like, chatting shit or not. But my theory is that there's something so empowering with a clear slate, because when you have a clear slate that hasn't been tainted, that is not influenced by the version of you were yesterday, you can be whoever you want. And I'm going to dig into, like, a little bit of my personal experience about this. I grew up in Mauritius. Mauritius is one of those countries where it's small enough that everyone knows everyone's, like, families to a certain extent. Big enough where everyone doesn't know, like, who you are specifically. You're like, it's like your what is a Mauritian surname? Your Patel. Okay, that's a common name. Your Patel, you must be this and this. They have, like, associations to it. For example, in Mauritius, the Patels are people that own like an eyewear company, and they're also known for being Muslim, and that's all I know about them. I also know who they're related to, and etc. But like, there's this massive like web of thing. Like, going back to my point, coming from Mauritius, everyone kind of, because of my surname, everyone kind of like had opinions and misconceptions and a lot of things about me, because they know about my family, they know about like this member of my family, and because this member of my family is like that, they tend to generalize. And a lot of time I've been told, that's such a your family name thing, and I'm like, haha, okay, but like laugh. And I think there was something so empowering when I moved into the UK and there was this clean slate where I had no pressure of, living up to the name or things along those lines. And I think this is where I really genuinely, like, the word I want to use is épanoui, but it translates into this is where I flourished because I had a clean slate. I could be whoever I wanted to be. No one knew me here. No one knew my family. No one knew anything about me. And yeah, it was something so fundamentally empowering. And I think I feel that every time I move houses as well, where I feel like this is like a new chapter. Woohoo! And I feel like we get this tendency of when we start a new job. Well, I've had one job so far, so it's not like I'm starting a new job in any year, but you're like, oh, a new chapter. And you feel like you could do anything. And I realized that this notion of like a clean slate that we tell ourselves, we have like first day of the year, better set up my vision board and my resolution. But in the grand scheme of things, if you really rationalize it, it's not a new year. We decided that, okay, there's a year, 365.25 days, and this is when it starts and this is when it ends. Technically, if someone decided tomorrow, the year could start on the 1st of August and end on the 1st of August again, and it would actually mean nothing. So, like, in the grand scheme of things, these new beginnings and these endings, per se, really are things that we tell ourselves to sleep better at night. At least this is my theory. This is kind of my epiphany. And I've just been really thinking about how, at least, I don't want to say we because I cannot assume for people, but at least I felt like how much I've kid myself. I'm like, New Year! If I have like a bad way of ending New Year's Eve, that means the year is starting on a bad note. Like, what are you on, Mansi? Like, what are you on? This makes no sense whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. Like, let's take, which year was I celebrating New Year's Eve with my family in Mauritius? December 2021. I had the most glorious, was that 2021? Yeah, December 2021. I had the best Christmas holidays with my family and my friends, and I came back and I felt so loved. And I was like, oh my God, if my year started and ended so well, there must be so much good stuff in store. Little did I know. I mean, I got the dream job. A few weeks into the year, I'm like, oh my God, this really is going to be the best year of my life. I mean, there's so many things that happened that made it one of the most life-defining years of my life. This is the year I also started cycle in 2022, around October time. But there's so many, like, really shit things that also happened in that year. The flatmate that I was living with, so I had three flatmates back then. One of them got so unhinged. It was actually so painful to live in that flat with her that me and my other flatmate, let's call her Margaret. And basically we would just like get out of the flat to stay away from her, and would find like any excuses to be out of the flat because it was so heavy to be around her. So like imagine feeling like that in your own home. Not a great feeling. And honestly, like, not something I ever want to live again. Probably one of the worst experiences. Not the worst just yet. Maybe I'll have an episode about questionable living circumstances, but one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Had a massive falling out with one of my best friends. I mean, things are better now, but it really scarred my friendship with her. Had another really massive falling out with another one of my best friends. I'm thinking of like bad stuff that happened in 2022 because there was quite a bit. Oh my God, there was a lot of things going on in my family, and actually I don't really want to talk about it right now But there were so many things that happened in my family, and when I went back home during summer break, I literally spent I didn't see any of my friends. I just spent time with my family, and I came back, and there was so much drama that there was so many things going on, and literally you would be like, oh, but if this year started on a good note, it better be a good year. And yes, it was. There was so many great things that happened that year, but there was just as bad things that happened that year, just as bad, if not a little bit worse. So in that sense, having a clean slate doesn't really, okay, let me word what I want to say better. Having a clean slate and, getting this new start, if you start something badly, doesn't mean you need a new clean slate whatsoever. If you start something badly, there's always room for you to make it better. I've had more, for example, I think of days I've had, and I just woke up and things went a bit wrong, and I'm like, this day started badly, it's going to be a bad day. And then you find ways to pivot, and then you go home, but you go to sleep feeling satisfied. You're like, you know what, it started not well, but at least, it was good. Which brings me back to the point that I was trying to make. If something starts off badly, you don't need a new clean slate. You can use what you have and make it better. And the same logic applies. If something started well, you cannot rely on your... Why do I want to speak French today? But you cannot rely on your... is it laurier? Correct me, French speakers. But you cannot rely on your, shoulders. Let's just say shoulders. You cannot rely on it and be like, oh, everything's going to be smooth sailing. It's not. Because if you think about it, this whole concept of a clean slate is fictional. Your clean slate could literally start any point in time. And if you need that to make you feel better, this is new me starts today. And I'm going to be a new person, and I'm going to start an enterprise, and I'm going to be healthy, and I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be that. You could. But please do not take, at least this is the conclusion I've kind of gotten from it, that do not treat the... How do I want to articulate this? What I'm trying to say is, yes, you can wake up today and choose to be a new person and, be healthy and start your business and do all of that stuff. But to a certain extent, do not, completely erase the person you used to be before that. There's, who you were yesterday and who you are tomorrow. There's, it's the same person. And if you want to be a different person, great. But at the same time, why you only would understand the why, which will give you the motivation to be this person, from that person you used to be. So let's take, I'm thinking Steve Jobs, but I was trying to think of one of the things I journaled about in the past year was how the more, I feel like people who go through the most hardships are the one who have a greater sense of what their purpose are. Because if we look at Steve Jobs, he had a challenging, controversial man, but he had a challenging life. And I think this kind of challenging in some ways, and this kind of very clear defined the vision that he had about what he was meant to do and what he wanted to do. So that was his why, I'm thinking of other people. Natasha Ocean, who's a YouTuber. I know I said that in French, sorry. Natasha Ocean, is that better? But basically, one of the core reasons why she created her brand was because, if I'm not wrong, I think she had an eating disorder. And then basically what was the media she was consuming just made things so much worse. And then she decided, hey, this is my why. Because when I was growing up, there was not that much science-backed research being fed to the consumer. So that became her brand. Going back to, I'm going in 50 circles. I want to do a diagram and kind of share how this is going. But basically, point being, if you want to start a new life today, do not discount the person you used to be yesterday. You need to know, you need to appreciate, you need to celebrate that person, because these experiences that were from that person that you were yesterday have led you to where you are now, and the trajectory you are on now, and have given you the sense of purpose, the whys, and everything that kind of led you to be who you are now. What even is the topic of this? I'm asking myself, is it beginning and ends? Is it clean slates? Is it hardship in life? It's all of it, I think. It's a kitchery. If you don't know what a kitchery is, it's an Indian dish where I think it's rice, lentils, and then vegetables, and it's all cooked together in like some sort of broth. But my grandma, or like I think in general, Indian families use that to say like it's many things. It's a lot of things. It's everything into one. It's not like a specific meal. It's not like tadka dal, which is like a dal, and you know there's onions and like lentils, and then that's it. To be fair, there's there's spices and the lentils and some water, and that's it. No, it's a khichdi is tadka dal. I don't think it's tadka dal. Don't quote me on this, but it's like dal and it's onions and it's spices, but it's also like random carrots and rice and this and that. It's a khichdi. But yeah, is this a new journey? Might I start something new, backed by my experience, because I feel like I have so much to say and there's so many topics that I've been exploring while journaling. I've been journaling for about 70 days now, which I think is absolutely mental, because I hated journaling and it's made me like want to talk about so many things and share it with you guys. Or is it just like a bleep? And this is one of the things that equips me for something that I'm going to do in the future. I don't know. And I also don't want to add the pressure on myself this time around to be like, okay, this is what you have to do. Let's go. There's enough pressure in life already. And I think, yeah, that's it. Well, if you're still here after this, 30-ish minutes of stream of consciousness, thank you for having me in your ears. Do like and subscribe if this is on YouTube. Do rate and give it a 5-star if this is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and leave a comment somewhere. Probably gonna have bits and pieces on Instagram, but yeah, feel free to engage, and I will engage back with you guys, because it's me and you and me. I'm learning from you. I'm actually exploring with you guys, and you're exploring with me. So welcome to Exploring with Mansi. Bye.